Hello and welcome to ThePrint. Today we have in the print studio with us Professor Hilal Ahmed. Professor Ahmed is one of the most renowned scholars in India on political Islam, on the politics of symbols, Indian democracy and so on. And Professor Ahmed has written a new book, an extremely important one, A Brief History of the Present, Muslims in New India. Professor Ahmed, welcome to ThePrint. Can you help us unpack this title to begin with? And I ask this in three senses. What do you mean by a brief history of the present? And why is it important to study the present moment historically? And what is New India? You say that it's not just a political slogan. What do you really mean by New India? And what is the role of the Muslim in this New India?
Very briefly, first of all, when I say a brief history of the present, uh, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not a historian. I'm a political analyst. Fortunately, because I can see things happening around us, and I would like to theorize them and unpack in a way that the analysis should reach to the people, because they are expecting this from us, the political analyst, not historian. Because the task of a historian is to just wait and look a long duration.
Yeah.
So, as a political analyst and as a political scientist, this is our duty to look at the present seriously, take the present, something which is significant to make sense of. So, that was the reason why I decided to look at the idea of the present very seriously in a historical way. Why historical? Because usually, and I make this distinction more powerfully, there is a distinction between past and history.
Yeah.
Past is something which is a big thing, while history is actually a tool to discover the past. And past travels with us in many ways, through memories, through narratives, etc. So, in political sense, it is actually the politics of the past, not politics of the history. So, therefore, it is very important to take that past out and try to understand how that past is making sense of the present. So that's the second reason why I decided to respond. I decided to use this title in a way. The idea of New India is significant. As I said that in the book as well, that this is not a slogan.
Yeah.
It is actually a doctrine, a political doctrine, introduced by the Modi regime in a very profound manner after 2014, rather systematically. And this New India is based on a conception of responsive government and responsive citizen. Therefore, usually people say that New India is actually a jumla. No, this is not a jumla. It is actually a policy paradigm in which a particular kind of state has emerged, which I call charitable state. So that is the reason why we should talk about New India. We take the idea of New India very, very seriously. The third thing is about how to look at Muslims, because whenever we think of Muslim, there are two kind of problems. One is that aggressive Hindutva has transformed Muslim identity into another, and which is true. Violence against Muslim has increased tremendously. So there is a tendency to see Muslim and BJP in a binary. But if you do systematic research, so when I say systematic research, if you do ethnography or if you do sample surveys, you find a very complex responses to this question. So therefore, the story of Indian democracy can be told from the Muslim point of view. So in this case, Muslim is a vantage point to make sense of both the New India as well as the history of the present.
And since you say that this is New India as a doctrine that was initiated by the Modi regime, and of course it carries with it Hindutva politics, do you think the idea of New India is it possible to have a new India without a Muslim subject? Can even the Modi regime think of a new India without the Muslim? And that's what I mean to ask. What is the role that the Muslim serves for the BJP, for the RSS in this new India, in the project of this new India?
First of all, we have to make a distinction between RSS and BJP.
Sure, sure, certainly.
Because that distinction is crucial. RSS is actually a network. BJP is a registered political party. So they do have similarities and differences as well. So we can come to that later. But it is very important, and yet this is a very significant question in my view. You know, first of all, what is new in New India? As I said, that actually New India is a political doctrine. This doctrine is based on the notion of responsive citizen and responsive government. And the kind of state, as I said, it is called charitable state because this state is making a distinction between economic life of people and the political life of people. In the economic life, there is a emphasis on free market. There is an emphasis that market will regulate itself and there is no need of any kind of political intervention in that sphere. While at the same time, the state is saying that we do recognize that this open competition might affect you. So therefore, we would provide you some kind of a relief, some kind of a charity in the sphere, in the social sphere. And we expect you as citizen to behave in a responsive way. We are developing your capacity in order to make you capable of competing in free market thing. This is the framework. In this framework, the idea in this framework is in a way universalized. The effort is universalizing. That we need to have anything, everything in national terms. And that's why there is a slogan called Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Now this Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is used in two ways. One, in order to legitimize the idea of homogenizing impulse of the political project, and two, to actually get rid of any specific policies and programs addressed to particular social group. So in some senses, idea of social justice is redefined. So the issues which were actually very specific to Muslims are not addressed directly, saying that Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas as a doctrine is capable of solving all the problems. So as a result, it is in my view a process by which you invisibilize Muslim. So Muslim are needed as significant other, but when it comes to dealing with them in socio-political terms, you would like to invisibilize them by evoking the idea of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. So therefore, you need Muslims, but at the same time, whenever something significantly linked to their socio-economic issues, you will address them rather differently. But we have to also remember that BJP is also conscious about the kind of constituency it has created for itself, the Hindutva constituency of voter. Because in Hindutva constituency of voter, there are basically three types of voter. One kind of voter which are actually traditional RSS Jansangh type voter, no matter who the candidate is, they are eventually going to vote for the BJP. The second kind of voter are those who actually were unhappy with other political parties, but they have moved to BJP and now supporting the BJP and Modi regime. The third are the floating voters. Now BJP establishment knows that in order to keep these two, meaning the floating one and the sympathizing one, those who have actually come from other different political parties, in order to keep them happy, it is always important to talk about Muslim in some senses, in some positive senses. And that's why BJP time and again evokes the idea of Pasmanda issues. So Pasmanda issues are not directly linked to, make any concrete effort to reach out to Pasmanda community or their socio-economic development. Rather, it is a kind of a strategy to keep those voters of BJP intact who would like to see BJP as an inclusive political party. So therefore, the Muslim presence is used in a rather significant way, in variety of ways, in order to get some kind of a legitimacy.
I'll come to the question of the Pasmandas in just a bit. Also, when you talk about Hindutva constitutionalism, and I would request you to explain to our viewers also what you mean by Hindutva constitutionalism. But within that, you say that it's not, the focus is not as much on the idea of the majority as much as it is on the
Yes.
idea of the minority. Explain these things to us. What is Hindutva constitutionalism, and why? What is the emphasis on the minority here?
See, Hindutva constitutionalism is a positive term. In normative sense, it is a positive term because it defines the relationship between citizen and the government. So citizen have certain rights, certain relationship with government, and these rights are important, and constitutionalism protect them. But there is a political meaning of constitutionalism as well. Every political party has got its own interpretation of the constitution. Now BJP, and before BJP it was RSS, Jansangh. Jansangh and BJP have always been a bit uncomfortable with the idea of constitution. And we know that in 1999 a review commission was constituted by Vajpayee government. What is important, and we must give credit to Mr. Narendra Modi, because he in fact invented the idea of positive reading of constitution for the sake of Hindutva politics. So when in 2014 they came, before the 2014 elections, when he was declared the prime ministerial candidate, he said this for the first time. He said that constitution is a sacred book.
It's a holy book, yeah.
It's a holy book. So why constitution is a holy book? So Hindutva constitutionalism, actually there are three features of Hindutva constitutionalism, because first it believes in a distinction between principles and rules. And it is argued that principles are settled. Principles like whatsoever is given in the preamble, equality, social justice, fraternity, these are actually settled issues. We need not to talk about it. Rather, we need to look at the rules and the duties of citizen. So the idea is to convert the constitution into a rule book so that it would become a holy book as well. That's the first feature. The second feature is that it is the second feature of the Hindutva constitutionalism is, as you also said, this is not about majoritarianism. It is about the question of minority. We know that there is a Supreme Court case going on in which it is demanded that
Hindus be recognized as
minority. And we must remember that the term minority was not defined by the constitution. So it is actually something which is intentionally not defined. The idea was it would remain secular, the term would remain secular, and obviously it should be decided at the level of the state. So
you mean different states?
Different states. So you need not to have a national minority, etc. But in 1993, the idea of minority was actually given some kind of a concrete status, and that's why 5 religious minority became the national minorities. And the idea was that these national minorities are declared specifically in relation to socio-economic backwardness. So they were declared national minorities, Muslim, Christian, even Jains. They were declared national minority primarily because to provide some kind of a socio-economic benefits so that they can develop and they can be part of the national mainstream. So that was the basic idea. Hindutva constitutionalism would like to use that idea of minority in such a way that Hindu victimhood can be played out. And that's the reason why, remember that anti-CEA thing. See, the idea of citizenship amendment is not based on majority, rather it's based on minority. Hindu minorities, not merely in India but in South Asia. Or globally. So there was an argument which is made by number of times by BJP leaders that Muslims have got 56 or 57 countries and Hindus have got one country. What does it mean? It means that you, in order to play the number game, you have to show the idea of minority and you have to legitimize that minority through constitution. So that's the second feature of Hindutva constitutionalism. The third feature of Hindutva constitutionalism is one nation, one constitution. Remember that RSS and both RSS and Johnson were very uncomfortable with the idea of 370, the special status that is given to Kashmir. But this time, the manner in which this article was problematized and the argument given to support the deletion of that article from the constitution were different. The idea was that the impression was created that this 370 was added to the constitution as some kind of an anomaly. So therefore there is a need to have one constitution and one nation. So this homogenization process is also central to the idea of Hindutva constitutionalism. So these are the three features by which Hindutva constitutionalism function, and that's the reason why this Hindutva constitutionalism is systematically used to nurture what I called Hindutva victimhood.
So this idea, this binary between constitutionalism and Hindutva is unfounded. Yeah. But do you think in your book, actually, I found this very interesting dividing line that you talk about between nuanced jargon, academic discourse, and easy to understand journalistic type of writing. And as an example, you talk about the Constitution and how it is assumed that it is a permanent reference point for everyday politics without actually probing how the idea of constitution interacts with people's lives and so on. I want you to explain to us how you think the constitution played a role in this election, because there was so much said about the constitution being the star of the election and so on. How was the idea of the constitution participating in this election according to you?
Tremendously, because for the first time a political party, in fact Congress, there was a section in their manifesto which was all about the constitution. And I think, and as I said earlier to you, that Congress manifesto in my view has been one of the most significant political document of the decade, because this manifesto categorically asserted the point that we need to protect the philosophy of the constitution. So if we protect the philosophy of the constitution, the rules and the by rules and laws and acts of the constitution would also be make more democratic and more people's oriented. So that's the point which manifesto asserts, the Congress manifesto. So in that sense, constitution was a real star. But what is the reception of the constitution? Remember that it is very fashionable to talk about, and that's why I was a bit unhappy the way in which constitution is used by political class. People, they know there is something called constitution. But constitution is not the only legal source which governs our lives. There are different set of laws, etc. So people's interaction with the lower level of laws, because there is a hierarchy and the constitution is at the top. So people think that constitution is pious, constitution is very democratic, etc. But the relationship between other set of laws and the constitution is problematic. And politicians know these distinction very well. So that's why the entire game of politics is played out between that grey area. The principles of the constitution and the laws, the set of laws which we have, and the ways in which these are implemented. So implementation laws, which were actually in some senses colonial laws, despite the fact we have new set of laws which were introduced. But if you just carefully look at them, you find it's just copy paste. But then there are certain norms, certain philosophical values which are given in the constitution. Now there is a conflict between these two. So there is a grey area, and this grey area, obviously there is a at the higher plank, you have the constitution, which is, remember, our constitution is an outcome of a political movement, democratic political movement, a national movement. That's why there is a spirit of andolan or movement in the constitution. But the laws were made to govern the society in a different way by the colonial state. So there is a conflict between these two. And the political class uses these conflict in order to create a legitimacy for themselves. So therefore there is a need to identify this. Now in this election somehow the democratic values of the constitution were highlighted. And on the one hand, the non-BJP parties highlighted those democratic values. On the other hand, BJP did not give up the constitution either. Remember one thing, as I said, that they are still doing the politics of Hindutva constitutionalism. So constitution has become some kind of a political object in last 10 years.
Subject to interpretation, different kinds.
Interpretation. So people, it is very important to realize how do people relate to it. One way of asserting that relationship is to look at the outcome of the election. The other way is that in non-electoral form of politics, how do people engage with the idea of constitution?
And you gave the example of the CAA protests.
CAA protest and number of different social movements going on in the country. They draw their inspiration not from any outside political ideology. The ideology of social movement is definitely coming from the constitution. So constitution is interpreted as a source for civil liberties and human rights, which is a remarkable development. You do not find any example all over the world where the existing set of legal constitutional discourse is presented to you as some kind of a source for doing radical politics of social justice, which we find in India.
You also talk about in your book about something called ideology-less politics.
Yes.
And you say that for the understanding of our viewers, you say political parties have already started behaving like political firms.
Yes.
That they addressed voters as consumers and they offer welfare packages to attract them, and they treat elections as a competitive market, you say. Now, you say this is true for both BJP and non-BJP parties. Can you explain how this might seem paradoxical, because one would think that the BJP, for instance, is a highly ideological party.
They
So
claim
explain.
They claim that they are the ideological party, but what is the ideology of BJP? Hindutva is officially not the ideology of BJP because Hindutva is not mentioned in the constitution of BJP. Even the vision document does not have the word Hindutva. So what is Hindutva? BJP leadership does not define Hindutva. In fact, there is a reference in the book, probably for the only one or two times Mr. Narendra Modi used the word Hindutva, and he said that I am not in a position to define it. I am not talking about RSS because RSS made a great effort in 2018. Mohan Bhagwat delivered 3 lectures to define what Hindutva is. So therefore, BJP is also not,
An ideological.
not an ideological party. They do have certain ideas, but now all political parties would like to come forward with certain kind of packages. And these packages are presented as if in election is a market. These are the product, and citizen are basically the consumer. And because we are involved in this kind of politics, the futuristic resolve to think of an idea of a good society somehow is not important for any political party. Even if you look at, as I said, that I really like Congress manifesto, but what is the futuristic imagination? No one has stopped any political party or any intellectual or any social group to think of an idea of a good society. I'm not saying that.
But what happens when BJP talks about Amrit Kal and when they talk about 1,000 years, the next 1,000 years, and what they will look like?
They are actually more intelligent than others. Yes, and in fact there is a discussion on Amrit Kal. That's actually a very important concept. Redefining and that's why the idea of present is important in my book. That why Amrit Kal is important, because obviously it's a futuristic idea, but the imagination of an inclusive society in future is not given. It is a presentist kind of an assurance given to the voter precisely for the sake of electoral victory
in the present.
not any futuristic resolve of some kind, or not any social change. Remember, uh, I would say, having said that, that BJP establishment is more intelligent than other political parties, because obviously India is the mother of democracy. Amrit Kal, New India. These are obviously conceptual terms which are given to us, and these terms are played out in a very, very creative way in order to link it, in order to establish a link between these and the electoral politics. But other political parties are almost clueless about it. Uh, in fact, just before Rahul Gandhi's yatra, because for the first time in last 10 years, Rahul Gandhi's yatra produced something very interesting, and that is called the Nyaya discourse, the discourse of justice.
Yeah.
Now we are at the moment at the cusp of something where the old narrative of politics has not died down.
The old
And
is
old is the Hindutva dominated narrative, which has not yet gone. All political parties, or some way or the other, would like to have some kind of a Hindutva driven nationalism as a reference point to produce certain ideas, not ideologies. And the new emerging discourse of Nyay or justice has not yet found a concrete shape. So it would be interesting to see how this, this tussle between Hindutva and Nyay is going to play out in next few years, and it has nothing to do with election, because electoral politics has got its own trajectory.
yeah.
So it is nothing to do with election, because when the narrative changes, the electoral outcome will also change. So we should not actually reduce everything to
The election result, yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, to answer your question in a straightforward way, is that political parties are intellectually incapable, and they are obviously, all these ideas, Amritkal, etc., these are driven by the logic of some kind of some kind of, I would say, packaging, some kind of a packaging of certain ideas in such a way that they could get some kind of an electoral advantages. But in the long run, the idea of social change is not in horizon. This is something which makes this political arena and the 1950 political party, the political parties which were there in the 50s, very crucial, because at that time the idea of political education was very important, and every political party has got some kind of a cultural organization of its own. Now, except BJP, and that's why BJP has got certain advantages. So, except BJP, non-BJP parties do not have cultural forum or social forum where you can think of the idea of change is systematically talked about.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the scenes in the parliament this time, because Rahul Gandhi, obviously he gave a speech that was by the non-BJP supporters. It was hailed as a very sort of successful speech, and the claim was that he was trying to reclaim Hinduism when he was telling Modi that आप Hinduism नहीं है, RSS Hinduism नहीं है. So that entire debate of Hinduism versus Hindutva kind of resurfaced. How did you view the scenes in the parliament and the impact that Rahul Gandhi had?
Did Modi say anything about Hindu or Hindutva in his speech? No. To best of my knowledge, no. He did not use the word Hindu or Hindutva. In fact, they responded to Rahul Gandhi.
They all responded to him.
Yeah. First of all, this Hindutva versus Hinduism debate is important, but it is bit late. It would have, obviously it has emerged in reaction to BJP. While, and many people compare Rahul Gandhi's strategy with Gandhi's strategy, which I don't buy. I don't subscribe to that argument. I don't think that that's a Gandhian politics.
How is that not?
It is not. It is not in two ways. One, that Gandhian use of religion was not meant for any electoral gains. It was not interest oriented. Uh, Congress's assertion to have, or BJP's assertion to have Hindutva, or Congress's assertion to have Hinduism, is actually driven by some kind of electoral gains and electoral interest. So we cannot say that obviously for Gandhi it is practice. One. Second distinction is that Gandhi was not, Gandhi's Hinduism was inclusive. Rahul Gandhi also said that Hinduism is inclusive. But Gandhi would say that unity of all faiths. Rahul Gandhi did say that unity of all faith, but Gandhi was, his unity of all faith was driven by an agenda for a comprehensive social transformation. And that comprehensive social transformation should not entirely be reduced to parliamentary speeches. Gandhi would say, obviously in Gandhian politics, religion is one element which will lead to constructive program, which will lead to seva, which will lead to Prabhat Pheri, which will lead to number of different initiatives, which will actually transform society, to provoke society for doing good and to develop some kind of a political morality of a different kind.
This is what you mean by the lack of a futuristic idea.
Absolutely. In Gandhian case, I need to change myself. Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi's yatras were certainly in Gandhian mode. But Rahul Gandhi is contesting election in an interest-oriented manner, raising this debate between Hinduism and Hindutva in the parliament. I do not think that it was entirely Gandhian. Because Gandhian politics, obviously, if you are really interested in Gandhian politics, which they are doing, means I am not denying the significance of Rahul Gandhi's politics. What I am trying to say is simply this, that obviously there is something called Bharat Jodo Abhiyan, which they are doing, which is very important. But what would be the futuristic, what would be the relationship between Bharat Jodo Abhiyan and the ideological configuration of Congress? Because in Bharat Jodo Abhiyan, the question of Muslim lynching is pretty much there, central. But Congress is shy away. That debate was not about Hinduism or Hindutva. 15 Muslims died since elections. And this time you have 232 opposition MPs. Why that has not yet become an important issue for them? Why Rahul Gandhi didn't say anything about that violence? He did speak with regard to the violence, but what about the violence that is actually inflicted on Muslims? Because that is a very serious issue. Muslims were killed because they were Muslims. So therefore, what would be your take on that? And Nehru was very much clear. Nehru did not shy away. Nehru was doing Gandhian politics in that sense, because he was not evoking Hinduism, Hindutva. He was saying that obviously Hinduism is important in cultural sense, but what is important is law and order in secular sense. We have to have a very modern secular state, and this state, and obviously Modi's state is also promising Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas. So why a set of people who belong to certain religion are being killed? So therefore, that's the reason why I find that obviously Bharat Jodo Abhiyan, I would support that initiative, but there is a need to expand the scope of political ideas and allow them to have some kind of a positioning with regard to Muslim, which I don't find in the present structure, the ideological structure of Congress.
You briefly, while answering one of the questions, said how BJP and RSS are not the same. Do you think there are differences in how the BJP and the RSS view Muslims? And that is to ask, is there a difference between how the question of Muslims is considered or pursued electorally versus intellectually or philosophically by the Hindu right?
See, BJP and RSS are, as I said, that there is certainly ideological convergence. So that convergence is important. Obviously, there are certain linkages. But how do they link themselves to Muslim is different. Because BJP is a political party and it is a registered political party, and obviously BJP has got significant number of Muslim leaders. RSS defines itself as a cultural organization. I don't think it's an organization, it is actually a network based on certain loose ideas. And these loose ideas are based primarily on the question of supremacy of Hindus. They keep defining, they keep changing their ideas with regard to that, and that flexibility has been their strength. So we have to understand that this RSS is not the RSS of Golwalkar. In fact, Mohan Bhagwat himself said that that is we don't buy that argument. So therefore, we need to understand RSS in its here and now context, and that's why history of the present is important. That why what kind of attitude RSS has got with regard to Muslims. So, if that is the framework, then I do not want to go back to what Golwalkar said about Muslims. Rather, I would be more interested in what Bhagwat said about Muslims. So, Bhagwat said something very interesting. He said that, in fact, in my book Siyasi Muslim, there is a discussion on Hindutva's Muslims, in which I quoted Bhagwat. That the argument Bhagwat makes is this, that Hinduism, Hindutva without Muslim is nothing. And in some sense he is right. That now you cannot, it is not, and that's why I don't think that we should equate RSS with any fascist kind of organization. It is a different organization. It is certainly a rightist organization, but it is not a fascist organization because of its flexibility. One. Second is that it would like to be part of the democratic system, and it would like to be accommodated in the democratic system. So therefore, the ecosystem of the democracy will have certain kind of impact on RSS as well. But at the same time, there is something called essentialism in RSS. And that essentialism, in my view, has been the point of reference to referring to Muslim as others. Despite their all good things about, or all good statement about Muslims, there is an emphasis on Hindu essentialism. And that essentialism is the reference point which keep defining Muslim as someone who would be seen as some kind of a threat. And that is a reference point for, all the cultural activities RSS does. Or the manner in which history is seen, the manner in which society is perceived, etc. So that's one. But when it comes to politics or politics of BJP, BJP's attitude towards Muslim is, as I said, that BJP would know, BJP leadership very much clear about it, that they would get 8 to 9% Muslim vote nationally. They do not expect many Muslim would vote for them. What is important for them, that this segment of Muslim voter which is voting for them must be highlighted in some sense in order to show the inclusiveness or inclusive
to cater to their
to their own constituency. So they both are doing they both have very different attitude toward Muslims.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you keep the foot down because it looks directly in the camera?
Yeah. So I think we are done.
We are done. Just one final question, and then I'll also conclude. So my final question is that in the book you write about how Muslims in India have probably recently developed this tendency, if I'm not wrong, that they tend to separate their inner spiritual world from the external world of politics. And the assumption is that a lot of attacks that are happening on Islam or on Muslims are belong to the external political world. Explain this sort of binary to us and tell us what are some of the survival techniques that you talk about, because you say that Muslims are deploying some survival strategies to kind of sail through this assault in the external political world. What are some of these strategies, and what is this distinction that the community has drawn?
See, basically, we have to understand, as I just said about RSS, that RSS is also changed, and similarly, Islam is also changed. This is not the Islam of say 1920s or 30s. Something very significant happened in last 30 years, especially among Sunnis, and this is something which I discussed in my book. And that is something called Tablighi Jamaat. Tablighi Jamaat was in the news for wrong reasons, but Tablighi Jamaat had a tremendous impact on Muslim self-perception, religious self-perception, especially among Sunnis, because that was the Sunni reform movement. There are 2 or 3 important things which need to be highlighted. Number one, Tablighi Jamaat emphasizes that we need to make Muslim more Muslim. So obviously it is a Dawat kind of an organization which would invite, it is to propagate Islam, but propagate Islam not to non-Muslims but to Muslims themselves. So make them more religious. One. Second is there was a lot of emphasis on peace, because if you want to create a new religious morality, you want a peaceful existence, and therefore you need to show your attributes in such a way that people would get impressed with your presence. And that's why Muslims started behaving in different ways, because the impact of Tablighi Jamaat was tremendous, and it has become the dominant religiosity all over India among Sunni Muslims. They did not give up their Sufi traditions. In fact, there was an interesting amalgamation of Tablighi Jamaat and the Sufi tradition. And that's the reason why, to show your good posture or good gesturing became some kind of a norm over the years. Tablighi Jamaat is facing a great crisis at the moment. In last 4 or 5 years, there is a split, etc. But it was basically some kind of a reform movement. Now that reform movement gave some kind of an imagination that there's something called external and there's something called internal. Now the political situation outside is an outcome of a political world in which it has nothing to do with our inner world. So we will continue to behave like good Muslim in the inner world, but we would not establish a direct link between that and the inner world. Because the idea of Tablighi Jamaat was this, that if I am a good Muslim, my iman or my faith is more important than my mosque. So that's why Babri Masjid Ram Temple was somehow a non-entity for a Tablighi Jamaat. For him or her, it was his worship. So when the question of namaz or the threatening of namaz became an important issue, that somehow destabilizes Muslim in a significant way. But the survival strategy, the question of survival strategy is like this. I'll give you one concrete example. When this question of offering namaz, congregational namaz on roads became problematic, many mosques decided to have at least 3 namaz, three congregational prayers inside the mosque on different times. So for example, today is Friday. So the one namaz will happen at 12:30, then 1:15 and 2:15, so that all the people will actually offer namaz inside, not outside. Similarly, Muslim also decided to hide their identity at every level. So for example, a Muslim person would travel in say metro and someone calls him or her, he or she won't say Walaikum Assalam. So this is also some kind of a strategy. So Muslims are actually adjusting themselves, realizing that the outside environment is hostile. Now what is important for us as an analyst is this, that we must realize the significance of these survival strategies, because Muslim knows that obviously BJP is not coming to them at all. BJP is not interested in Muslim vote and Muslim community. The other non-BJP parties are equally they are not also indifferent. They are indifferent. They do not want to embrace Muslim the way they used to. So in such a situation, Muslims have got one thing which is surprising and which is also must be highlighted: their faith in democracy. And that's why the polling percentage has not gone down. Muslim polling turnout is not gone down. Their participation in non-electoral politics of different kind has not gone down. Their interaction with the state has not gone down. So it says that they're very much involved in the activities. But at the same time, there is a realization that we are abandoned. And that's why they would like to have new kind of strategies in order to cope with the external world. And that's why this distinction between internal and external has become very significant. By the way, it is very important to remember that that's the reason why the internal reform process has somehow also stunted. So, look at triple talaq laws. There was an overwhelming opposition to this.
Yeah.
But because the clergy was supported by non-BJP party in a significant way, and the moment non-BJP parties decided not to support the clergy, they are actually nowhere, and nothing happened. The law passed and nothing happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why is that so? So the internal questioning is also happening in a significant way. So there is, I would say, a very strange positive impact on Muslim societies that there are internal questions emerging, especially with regard to women, which is a positive development in my view.
Yeah, Professor Ahmed, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating discussion, and this is an extremely compelling book, but I have to admit also at the same time a very ezy to read book.
Thank you.
So congratulations for this book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.